Indonesia has revealed a radicalized civil servant who was ready to become a suicide bomber has been arrested. Officials haven't disclosed which government agency she was from, but they say it would have led to serious consequences if she hadn't been detected and dealt with. So for more, we're joined by Dr. Noor Huda Ismail, who's visiting fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies.
Dr. Noor, thank you so much for joining us. Just want to ask you first, do we have more details about this suspect? Because it hasn't been released by the government itself, but what do we know, and how big a problem is this in the civil service?
So two things that we need to address here. Perhaps the report referred to the recent arrest of two female Indonesian police officer coming from Ambon, it's a specific area. So that their trajectory of radicalization is super interesting because initially she attended to one of the sermon next to her house, and then interested to the costume, the dressing. So it's when we talk about radicalization, we tend to look at it because of listening to creepy calling of jihad, but this is through fashions, through culture, and then because they wanted to, confirm her identity as a good Muslim woman, they started to shut online, and when online get into more, going to rabbit holes, and then this is what happened to most of the radicalization among Indonesian.
Absolutely, there's certainly a trend emerging, but as with regards to this particular suspect, which part of the civil service is she from, and should we be concerned?
I think, because the one that arrested, at least two, coming from the police themselves, So this is two Indonesian policewomen who recently arrested, my link to the report that, maybe part of the reference that the religious minister said during the, during one of his talks.
Right, so the policewoman being arrested, so she's from the police department, civil service, how worried should we be?
I think now, because we have talking about 250 million Indonesian populations, and then the rise of the social media, people can easily access to all the information, especially if you do not have a proper channel to address religious issues. So, but I think the Indonesian government has been working super hard to deal with this issue. I myself involved in a lot of these initiatives. But again, the magnitude of the problem, the people itself. And then, it's massive. The presence of social media, it's changed the game, It's changed the game. It's not only about Indonesia, but even here in Singapore and Europe. If you look at all the radicalization, people actually join ISIS. Mostly women, 20%. In Indonesia, 70% women and children. So it's a completely changed. So to understand this, therefore, we need to understand two different types of recruitment. The offline one, which is the old organization that we know of, like JI, where they have a clear path. They're going to specific Islamic boarding school, reading specific book, and then being sent to any international armed conflict in the Pakistan or Philippines or even Iraq. So when they come back, they want to be part of, their army, basically. This is still going on, which is quite challenging. And another thing will be the new type of recruitment, which is online radicalization. And then we need to find new ways to tackle this very issue.
That is a really good point that you made, because one is the physical, the school and the community, but yet one is borderless. It goes beyond the regions. But still, given that this emerged in Indonesia, do you think the Jokowi government can address this, particularly the new developments in the online sector of radicalization?
If you look at, if you look at the lineup of the government today, it's very obvious that Jokowi, as a president, really determined to tackle this very issue. So we have, a number of lineup of the. It's very issue. This cabinet is cabinet anti-radicalization. Knowing that Jokowi is fully aware that this is the issue in Indonesia that we have to tackle, the rise of not only radicalization that might lead into violent extremism, but also the rise of political identities, Islamic political identities on the rise. This is something that I think require a lot of collaboration from many stakeholders in Indonesia, not only from the government, but also from the civil society as well.
And how effective do you think these measures are in trying to tackle, as you mentioned that, it's a two-pronged approach. Two different types of situation going on.
I think I'm always optimistic that we're trying to but we have to understand that it is a marathon type of, endeavor. It's not sprinter. You cannot tackle this issue as quick as possible. It requires stamina. It requires, commitment as well, from many different sectors. Therefore, a number of initiatives that I have been using in myself in tackling this issue will be empowering through the family members, family unit, because now the radicalization taking place within a very small unit of family, and this is something that we have to really, really concern and aware.
Well, particularly if you're trying to reach out to women, right?
Yes,
and as you said, it's always through the family. Fashion, you mentioned, things like that. It's a different language that you have to speak.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a different approach.
It's just a soft approach, a cultural approach. And people always tend to think that radicalization is about attending to creepy preachers, someone who attack this. No, sometimes it's starting from very simple music, fashion, and gradually going to that directions. This is something that we need.
Well, what you also said, which really opened up the scope of this issue, is the fact that it's all happening online.
Yes.
It has no borders.
Yes.
It takes more than just Indonesia. What would you like to see, well, other countries in the region? What role would you like to have them play in this battle?
Maybe the best way will be now is what it sounds cliche, what we call it digital literacy. So people should understand how to understand the content here. But for especially as a Muslim or anyone basically who want to study religion, they should study to the proper channels, understanding context, because text without context is pretext. So and this is what. If you look at all the radicalization in Indonesia, those being radicalized. In the past, we always think, oh, those individuals study in Islamic boarding school or madrasah. Apparently, those who in a public school, because they're never being exposed to the traditional understanding of specific religions. Because if, as a Muslim myself, to understand Islam, you need to understand history, the context, and then people just jump into what Sheikh Google said, and learning internet. Yeah. Will be, the dangerous things.
Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us some context and background into this latest development out of Indonesia, Dr. Noor Huda Ismail. He is a visiting fellow from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies.